Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, Connect Content Enabled Constructible, the 3 C's of Construction 4.0, and what it means for you. This event is brought to you by Engineering News Record and sponsored by eBuilder. Hi, I'm your moderator, Scott Seltz, publisher of ENR, and thank you for joining us. Our presenters today are Dan Connery, Capital Program Advisor at eBuilder, and Tim Davis, Capital Program Advisor at Trimble. Throughout his 24-plus year career, Dan Connery has leveraged a unique blend of backgrounds from the architect, engineering and construction industries, project and program management, and software industry to position tech companies for growth. Before joining eBuilder, he most recently served as Vice President of Business Development at Newforma, and has also served as VP of Construction and Owner Solutions at Newforma, and played key product roles at Oracle Primavera. Tim Davis is a construction industry veteran with over 15 years of experience working for owners and general contractors before joining Trimble in 2005. He has focused his career on helping people realize the benefits of adopting technologies to support construction. Having spent a significant amount of time with contractors and owners on site, in the office, and analyzing industry trends and best practices across the globe, Tim has a unique view into the future of our industry. And now I'm excited to turn it over to today's first presenter, Dan Connery. Dan?
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. So I feel very privileged to have the time today to talk with you about some of the challenges that we see in the industry here at Trimble, and share with you some of the information we've been gathering after probably about 6 months on the road talking with our customers and our prospects. And so getting right into it, one of the things that we see from a challenge perspective in our industry is kind of a good news, bad news situation. So the good news is that across the board we're seeing really, really good, healthy growth. And specifically within the construction sector, we're seeing upwards of 10% growth. So what we talk about from a Trimble perspective when we talk with our owners is that showing a nice, good increase in demand for construction services. Now, what's complicating this on the flip side is that from an ability to actually build these projects, we see a supply side problem. Contractor after contractor after contractor tells us that they're seeing a challenge in hiring labor, both blue collar and white collar, to do work on these projects. So when I talk with large construction companies, what they tell me is they have an extremely healthy backlog. For our owner customers, though, that backlog may constitute a problem for them because they want their projects built quickly, either because they have a time to revenue deal or they have a time to service. So if it's a government public sector, it's getting these facilities into service. If it's a private sector, it's about generating revenue or fulfilling the mission of your organization. So we see this increase for demand, and yet at the same time a decrease in the ability to satisfy that demand. To exacerbate this, we also see that we are one of the last industries remaining that have a negative compound annual growth rate when it comes to productivity. Ironically, being part of Trimble, one of the other sectors that used to track along with construction with a 0 or negative productivity growth was agriculture, and yet agriculture is starting to see an increase in productivity, and one of the other major sectors for Trimble is automation in the agricultural market space. So you have an increase in demand, a decrease from a labor supply perspective, and productivity that's at best case flat or declining. So there's a problem here that this can't sustain itself. And the way that we quantify this, or the way it's been quantified in the marketplace, is that in the United States alone, $177.5 billion, so that's a B, billion dollars, in labor cost and non-optimal activities is effectively wasted. And so when we talk with our owners, that's their money that is being wasted. And when we talk with contractors, there's profit that's being lost. So again, market supply is down, demand is up, productivity is flat or declining, and money is being wasted. So what do we do to address this? So what we talk about is what we focus on at Trimble is on this productivity side, because we believe that if we can help the industry improve productivity, then by direct correlation, projects will have better outcomes. And at the end of the day, that's what owners care about, is they care about project outcomes, and we believe a way to get there is through improving productivity. So at Trimble, what we've been talking about for a while, but a lot more recently, is this constructible process. And so we're talking about Trimble constructible. And we break that up into what I call the 3 C's and why they matter. And so within Trimble, we're focused on attacking this concept of Trimble constructible, which is helping transform the industry both from a digital perspective, so that's software, as well as from a physical perspective when it comes to the hardware or the physical assets that are out on the job site. So we look at Trimble constructible as being a system of interacting your software, your hardware, as well as the services provided that allows you to add value throughout the entire life cycle. And we believe if we can help the industry focus on this through the constructible, the connected, and the content-enabled, that's what's going to improve productivity. So a way that we can measure success is, does that productivity curve stop declining and actually start on the positive trajectory? And so what I'm going to focus on today is the division that Tim and I work for, which is the Trimble PPM division, Project and Program Management, and we're going to focus on that connected. How can we connect the different stakeholders in order to improve productivity? So when we think about a project or a program, we think along 3 different dimensions. The people in the field, those that are actually doing the work, building, assembling, etc. Those that are coordinating, so the team, and then the back office. So how can we integrate or connect these different 3 constituents? And so what I really enjoy about joining, when I had the opportunity to join Trimble, is that we're uniquely positioned in the marketplace around the field side, so the physical devices in the field that are constantly collecting information. And so what we want to do is we want to connect the field components, so the physical assets in the field, whether they be scanners, HoloLenses, pieces of equipment, 3D scanner for total stations. These different devices are collecting all kinds of useful information. So how can we connect that into the project team? And so we want to connect that into the product that's being used by the team. So this is now into the software side. So for your field management and your document management and contract and changes and job costing, how can that information flow seamlessly into the team so they can start doing work with it? How can you start producing predictive analytics? How can you leverage artificial intelligence to find problems before they become problems? Tim and I talk about this constantly throughout the day, about not using technology, not using your project control solution or your project information management solution as a way to win a claim when it happens. How can you use the technology to avoid the claim entirely? So that gets in, again, to the predictive analytics and into the artificial intelligence. But in order for these systems to work, they need data. And what I hear routinely, frustration from people in our industry, is that the humans are the ones collecting all the data. So they're filling out daily reports, and they're filling out RFIs, and they're processing submittals, et cetera, et cetera. I had one person one time pull me aside and say, you know what, I don't know what happened, but I joined this industry to be a project manager, but what I am is a project information manager. All I do all day long is enter stuff into systems. I don't actually work with other people. And my contractors told me, you know, I want to be out in the field working with subcontractors, solving problems that arise in the field, but instead I'm sitting in a job trailer keying information into a system, filling out daily reports, and et cetera. And so we envision a day when really the reality is the equipment should be able to track a lot of that progress. So an excavator knows exactly how much dirt it moved. Dump truck knows when it delivered something and where it delivered it to and how much it delivered. So you don't have to collect that manually. So that's what we can work on. So then we want to connect that into the back office. So what we want to do is then connect this information, for example, costing information, seamlessly into whatever is running the back office. So that is the Oracle or SAP or Lawson when we talk with our own organizations, or Viewpoint, CMIC, Sage, JD Edwards, the different ERP systems the contractor uses. So one of the things that I hear a lot when I'm out and about is this concept of double data entry. But the reality is it's not even double, it's not even close. I've seen instances where the same piece of information is entered 15, 20 different times. So not only is that a fundamental waste of time, but the opportunity for a data entry mistake between all these different systems is astronomical. And those run into or can cause problems later on in the project life cycle. So really the point is you should be able to enter the data once, or in the instance of equipment, have the information collected once and have that information flow throughout the life cycle and throughout the system. So I've been imagining something like this as being possible for 20 plus years. Now joining Trimble, I actually realized not only can you imagine it, but you can actually do it. So that's what's exciting about me now, exciting for me now. So another thing, I hear a lot of companies talking about this, which is fantastic. It's good to see that the technology industry is focused on the supply chain. So we have a very unique and very, very disconnected supply chain in the construction industry. It's one of the reasons why some of the lean methodologies that manufacturing has deployed have been slow to penetrate into our industry, because we have such a super fragmented supply chain. But more and more technology companies are investing in trying to try to defragment, at least from a technology perspective, the supply chain. So I talked about the fact that what's neat about Trimble is out on the job site, especially in the heavy civil side, there's all kinds of equipment that's running Trimble technology. Now, the technology for me personally is less interesting who made it, but it's the data that technology is constantly streaming, this whole concept of Internet of Things that Tim's going to talk about in his portion of the presentation. So the ability to connect that the equipment and the equipment in the field knows what it did, how much it did, when it did it. It just knows that, and it's no longer subjective. We imagine a time when percent complete on different items is no longer me telling you I'm 10% complete. It's irrefutable that 10% of the work is done because the equipment is tracking this information for us automatically. Similarly, when it comes to people out in the field with different pieces of equipment, again, not the heavy civil, but now just the total stations and other pieces of equipment out there, it's how do we get the data out of these systems into something else that can actually be transformative. And then what's neat, again, from an ecosystem perspective, is connecting then the general contractor all the way up into the owner. And that's where we have a unique place in the marketplace, is having major components in every one of these systems. So now what we do inside of Trimble is spend a lot of time talking about how can we connect the ecosystem. So it's not about trying to get 15 different companies to play well together. We have all the products under the umbrella. So then we get into connected construction. So this is another way to just visualize that model. So for some folks who weren't quite there mentally with where I was going, hopefully this graphic can help reposition everyone. So when we talk about, again, about the field, the office, and then across the various stakeholders. So in the field, it's a matter of having the ability to track what equipment. I think about, again, daily reports. I don't mean to harp on this, but I have a personal problem with daily reports. It drives me nuts that people spend time filling these things out. So a big part of daily reports is labor, equipment, and materials. Well, what if all of this information is automatically collected? So you have systems that know what laborers came on site, when they showed up, when they left, where were they at all points in time on that job site. You can integrate where that labor is relative to the schedule. You did a pull plan, you just had a pull planning session, and people said they were going to be a certain part of the project, but they're not. You can intervene immediately. This is where I feel we lose a lot of the productivity, is just work you expected to be done is not being done, and using a lean method concept, it's workers waiting for work or work waiting for workers. So to be able to integrate that, but it's all real time. Materials as they're delivered on site automatically being logged in so that a contractor can submit for payment for materials stored on site. So a lot of this can be fully automated. And then what we want to do is pull that back into the team. So for job costing and schedule and fabrication. So I'm not telling anybody on this call anything new about how much prefabrication is really sweeping the industry. So rather than delivering raw materials on site and then assembling those raw materials, you can prefabricate in clean environments and then deliver things into components, which helps with logistics. It's another area that Trimble is heavily investing in on the logistics side of things. So as you're working in large urban areas where you can't shut down major roadways for big deliveries, you can sequence these things much more seamlessly. So having this information flow back and forth, and then as I get to the stakeholders, it's how do you get information flowing? So I talk about horizontal integration. How do you get a company, Acme General Contractors, to get information to flow within their company? So that's from the field to the team to the back office. But then how do we get that same information to flow what I call vertically, from subcontractor to general contractor to owner and to the design firms? So how do you get the information around a project to flow across all the different stakeholders? So not only do you not want somebody in your own company typing the same information into 10 different systems, but you have control over that. You have much more control as an organization over how many times you type in the data into your own systems. May not do a great job at it, but you have control over it. What you don't have control over is how do you prevent that same piece of data from being entered into every single person's system, again, from manufacturer to subcontractor to general contractor to the owner organization to the design firms, and then all of the ancillary organizations that float around. How can we make sure that information doesn't have to be keyed in more than once? So both of those, we want to attack both of those. So one of the things we do at Trimble, we have this process which is borrowed from an organization called Pragmatic Marketing, this concept of NIHITOS. NIHITO is an acronym that stands for Nothing Important Happens in the Office, or Nothing Interesting Happens in the Office. And the point of NIHITO visits is get out of your location, get out and sit down with customers and prospects and talk with them before doing things. And so one of the things we understand is there's information that's specific to each individual. So we think about at a macro level the different major players, so the owner, the builder, and the designer of a project. There's information that each one of those have that's specific to them. They don't want to, nor do they need to share with anybody outside their organization. So that stays within their organizational boundaries. However, we know when it comes to budget and schedule and quality and safety and constructability, there's information that does need to flow. And I've been in this industry for 24 years, and for 24 years we've been talking about how to solve this problem, and nobody has solved it. There's been a lot of efforts with AGC XML, IFCs, there's been lots of initiatives, but really I haven't yet seen, and maybe somebody has done it, and if so, please share it with me, of how do we get information to flow across these different constituents, because there's major players, major technology players, that dominate each one of these different constituents, or different segments. So we recognize the fact that we want this information to flow between them. Now, we went out and we did some research of, well, where should we focus? And we originally had conceived that we would focus on integrating cost, because we figured at the end of the day it's all about money. Money talks. And so we thought it would be having an application for payment flow seamlessly across all the different constituents, or contracts or change orders. But what actually came out loud and clear when we spoke with customers and prospects is the biggest area for improvement is RFIs and submittals. And the reason for that is if we talk about the dimension, the horizontal axis here, the x-axis is about these documents impact on your schedule, your ability to deliver your project on time. And then the y-axis, the vertical axis, is how many different times do you do this particular process. And then the size of each one of these circles is how many different companies, how many different organizations touch that process. And so if you ever hear anything about what do you want to focus on, it's always in the upper right quadrant, up and to the right. So RFIs and submittals, huge impact on schedule. You typically on a project deal with lots of them. We can argue why that happens for RFIs, because in a perfectly run project you should have 0 RFIs, but that's a discussion for a different E&R topic. And then a lot of different companies touch them. So that's the area that we chose to focus, and we're soon going to launch the ability to have RFIs flow seamlessly between the contractor and the owner. And so really what we're focusing on is our ability to digitally connect or create digital handshakes between the contractor and the owner. And then over time, we'll continue to extend these handshakes out to all the different major constituents, so between the subcontractor and the contractor and the designer and the contractor and the designer and the owner. Owner, designer, and contractor. So the fact that however these handshakes happen, once the digital handshake is done, the information starts flowing between the different constituents. So that was really my major part. So that was the problem that we wanted to go out and figure out how to solve, the problem of productivity in our industry. It's what drives us within the Trimble PPM group, and it's the problem that we want to tackle. I know I want to tackle before I retire, and I think we have a line of sight to be able to do that, and the areas that we're focusing on initially. So with that, I want to hand it over to my colleague Tim, and he's going to take us through this journey to what we're calling Construction 4.0. So with that, Tim, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dan. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so let me jump in here. What I wanted to do is show a little bit of my age here and go back in time and talk about what I'll call Construction 1.0. And when I got out of college, we had none of the computers or cell phones, surprisingly enough, and we did everything via paper. So I would start off my morning gathering up all my paperwork or from the night before at one job, and I would drive to another job where we had a fax machine, and I would fax the paper around, and then I would drive to the architect's office, pick up any drawings or approved submittals, and then I would drive into the corporate office and justify what was going on on the project to my management team, and then drive back out to the job site. So every day I drove what I called the loop. And then shortly after, we evolved into Construction 2.0, and we took that paper, and we made it all digital. So we took those old paper processes and we put them on computers that ran at the job sites, and then we started to email things around. And I'm calling that Construction 2.0, which was a huge benefit for me because I didn't have to drive the loop every day. I only had to drive the loop every week. And people at the corporate office were getting some visibility into what was going on at the jobs, and the architect and I could communicate back and forth via email. So then we evolved again into what I'm calling Construction 3.0, where now we put those systems in the cloud and we allowed other people to access our systems. But the interesting thing is everybody looked at this selfishly. So we looked at what devices we had and what were our requirements for workflow, and that's how we all built our system. So the architect may have had their system, the owner had their system, the contractor had their system, and they are all purpose-built for that role. And I believe a lot of us are still here today, and there's a lot of discussion and cutting edge of how do we share data through things like APIs. But then we also had something come in, which is, I call it black box BIM, the concept of BIM. So building information modeling was a centralized place where we could all go to exchange information through the model. But that's still evolving, and everybody's still trying to figure out what that means to their business. And I know a lot of contractors out there would agree that the models that we get aren't necessarily something that we can build off of. So we've got a long ways to go to advance things to a point where the models that we're using are truly centralized, and then are they able to share information between all the teams? And I think we're a little ways away from that. So what we started to do at Trimble when we start looking at what I'm calling Construction 4.0, it's not just the advancement of BIM and the constructible model as a centralized data share. It's also having a global infrastructure, having positioning, the ability to find precise positioning, being able to connect and have integrated workflows, include artificial intelligence and machine learning for all the devices, the IoT devices, the Internet of Things. So right now, Trimble has over 500 million devices on construction sites out there. And we're rapidly developing software solutions for all the stakeholders on a construction project. So when we start stepping back from the problems and looking at them in terms of, okay, what is this going to mean to us in the future? I'm going to dive into a little bit of this IoT section and take a look at what's going on there right now. So the Internet of Things is rapidly growing. Devices surround us everywhere. And I have an example here of something we can all relate to, a mom in a car. And the number of devices that are associated with just that scenario is incredible. I think we take it for granted because they're a lot of times not visible. But we're surrounded by these devices that are transmitting information other than just your phone. So how does that relate to a construction project? Well, let's just talk about an example of machine control and fleet management, for example. So we're able to take a constructible model from the office and push it down to the operator and to the job site and to the piece of equipment. And through embedded cameras and sensors and controllers on that piece of equipment, we're actually able to operate that piece of equipment, and we're moving rapidly towards autonomously in some cases, but also the piece of equipment is communicating back to the model. Not only things like progress, but a lot of other metrics as well. And this is all happening on a prescribed time frame. So like every 10 seconds, it's updating and checking to see if the model's changed and to see if the sensors are updating what the progress is. So we're starting to see real-time access to what's the progress on the job and be able to control the machine more efficiently and keep the operator updated and the machine updated to what changes have happened in the model, all in near real time. And then with the fleet management, we can put sensors on pieces of equipment and track what they're doing. Are they being utilized? Did they start? Did they stop? How much fuel have they used? How many times have they lifted something? Is it dumping? And we can start optimizing our construction projects for efficiency and eliminating waste, which is a huge benefit. And what this really lends itself to is a connected job site. So when we look at it in terms of machines, the designs are flowing from the designers through an approval process to the job site and out to the machines, and the machines are communicating in near real time back up to the office. So everybody has a picture of what's going on. Well, let's take a look at some of the things that are happening with labor and compliance. So we have systems and badges and sensors that we're able to put onto a job site to not only track time from how much time did somebody spend on a job site, but also did they pass their drug test? Have they gone through safety training? Did they pass their background check? So some of these things are really important, and what we've done with some of our customers is we install gates. And at those gates, you present your badge, and it can check all of those things. It can say, if you didn't pass the drug test, you're not getting access to the site. Or if you haven't gone through safety training, they get a pop-up on their phone that says, hey, you need to go do safety training, but you're not getting access to the site until you can do that. If they do get access, it actually logs their time as to entering the job site and would track them exiting the job site. So it's a really powerful set of tools. And then we also have things like pucks that we can stick on tools and track their location around the job site so that we don't have to waste time spending time looking for a tool that somebody else has or that we left somewhere on the job site. So now we can add the dimension of where is something quickly and find it just by putting a sensor or a puck on that tool or whatever it is that we're looking for. We talk about things like laying out your job. So we have the robotic total stations and precise positioning prisms where we can very, very precisely locate things. So we don't have problems where the plumbing chase is not aligned with where the plumbing cutouts are in the floor, or that we're actually aligning the ductwork with where it's exactly supposed to be, or that our lag bolts are where they're supposed to be from a standpoint of setting the foundation wall. So there's a lot of that that's going on, And again, what we're seeing similar to Trimble in the civil space with controlling machines is that same concept, taking the model, being able to push it out to the person in the field so that they have real-time access to the design changes, so that when we're building, we know we're building off the most current thing, whether that's still paper drawings or whether that's a 3D model, and being able to communicate progress back up to the model or to the cloud. So that leads itself to project measurement and quality control. So now we have things like 3D laser scanners where we can go in and do high definition scanning of a building. These take time, so now we see technology advances in things like photo programmetry, where we're able to take a 360-degree camera and recreate a point cloud off of that camera. And so all of this lends itself to being able to look at a job site and compare it to where we're supposed to be, and actually be able to report back what's been done and what hasn't been done in near real time. So this has huge benefits on things like if we've looked at earned value or some of these other metrics we've built around. Some of the biggest challenges are getting the real-time information of where is progress actually on the job, and we've done that through people and quantity surveyors and labor-intensive processes where people go out and they record the information to the best of their ability, and then they send the paper back to the office and somebody consolidates that and reports it to the scheduling staff. Well, what if they just had access to where it was immediately? And then working with mixed reality and things like HoloLens, where people are on the job site and they can actually see the model overlaid through augmented reality as we're communicating that model in real time out to the job site, so that they can see changes and impacts and look at where things are supposed to be, helping them do their job. Another example would be something like concrete mix design. What if we had sensors, and we do have sensors on machines, where as soon as that cement mixer leaves the shipping warehouse and goes to the plant, it's tracking what mix design is being loaded onto that cement mixer, how many times the drums spun, how much water is being added to the concrete mix, so that when that truck arrives on the job site, it knows what's on it, and if that concrete is deficient or that it isn't the right mix design, and gives somebody the ability to divert that truck off and maybe not pour it, eliminating rework. So the theory here is some of these paper processes that we've been doing, we're not looking at how do we enhance those paper processes and make them more efficient through more sophisticated workflow. It's how do you eliminate them completely. So in this case, if the mix is the wrong mix design, don't place it, because you're probably going to have to do rework and have a bunch of legal battles around it. So again, driving us to the connected job site and being able to look and have real-time feedback of what's going on your job site, and having sensors to check for things like falls or material management or deliveries or gate entry or access, what's happening with the weather or operating materials, operating equipment. I'll build this line out. So imagine a day when a daily report is not my opinion of what happened on the job or my personal observations, but where sensors and devices are actually reporting the progress on a job. How much labor was on the job? Well, why would I have to do a timesheet ever again when I could just feed that information again? How much equipment? What were my fuel charges? What equipment was on my job? Well, instead of somebody having to go around and gather all that information, what if it just fed into the system? What happens if you wanted to look at progress and the point clouds are being fed in for the day? What about drone flyovers or pictures or videos? So we're also not only diverting from paper processes, but how do we enrich the data to a point that it's something that the industry has never seen before, so that people can make better decisions about what's going on? So when we look at that in terms of integrated workflows, it poses some interesting questions. Whose data is it? Is it the owners or the contractor's data? If we're videoing a job site 24/7 and we're taking point cloud scans and all these things around us are reporting back progress and what's going on the job, is that the owner's data? Is it the contractor's data? So what we're saying is maybe it's both, and we direct the data to the people in the way that they want to use it, but remove the obscurity of somebody's opinion of what's going on a job site. So I think this is going to lead to some interesting challenges for our industry in the way that maybe the paper processes that we developed from the old Corps of Engineers, things like submittals, for example, and I'm going to take some time to pick on submittals. You know, submittals in my day where they handed you the submittal book and they said, this is the Bible, and I think a lot of times they wanted you to create a submittal log because they wanted to make sure you actually went through and read the submittal book. But today what we're seeing is companies that are saying, hey, how can we extract that via OCR and build the submittal log without somebody actually having to read the spec book so that we can just get on with gathering the information that we need? And how do we workflow route that as efficiently as possible? In my opinion is, I think that that's an old process that we need to reimagine and forget about how we route paper better. But because most of the information we're gathering is already in the cloud from the suppliers, maybe we need to take a look at how we contract and how we set up the intent of what the design is in a better way so that maybe something that people actually want to interact with and read rather than a huge spec book. So maybe the suppliers, as they bid the job, they're actually submitting their submittals at the time they bid the job because everything's already intelligent enough to link up, and then the contractor just gets that information. And I think this is going to be the challenge of our industry is as we see the advent of BIM coming, as we see this technology that's already out there on our job sites, these old paper workflows like the AIA forms developed back in 1988 for contracting no longer apply. So what we're trying to do is sit down with some of our key owners and contractors and architects and engineers and bring them to the table and say, I think we need to take a look at how are we going to contract in this new technology environment that we're in. And, maybe it changes the dynamics of how we do things. So we're starting to have these symposiums and roundtables to look at what does a daily report look like in the future? How are we going to measure progress on our jobs? How do we submit information in a way that the design intent is something that people actually want to work with and use, and it's easy? And in a lot of cases, instead of enhancing the workflow, we're actually able to eliminate the process from people having to touch it completely. So we're entering a very interesting time, and we're super excited about where we are in the marketplace and how we're positioned right now to take advantage of the over 500 million devices that we have out on job sites right now and really look at changing the way that we interact with owners and contractors and subcontractors and build processes for the next century. So that's all I had. I'll pass it back over to you, Scott, if you wanted to open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Tim and Dan. That was a great presentation. As Tim mentioned, if you have a question, now would be a good time to send it in to our presenters. And in the time remaining that we have, we'll try to field as many of these as possible. Before I do start to address some of those questions to our presenters, I do want to remind you that we'd love your feedback on our webinar survey to help improve our program, so take that time to do so after the presentation. But now let's go to our first question. And I think this question actually, Dan, I'm gonna throw it to you, and came from Gerald Dassler at the very beginning of our presentation. How is productivity defined in construction? Or how are you defining it?
So we define productivity pretty simply. Output divided by cost. So how much does a cost you to produce a unit of work, so whatever that output is. So that's the macro level definition of productivity.
Great. A little deeper question here. Megan Bowden, her question is, well, it's a statement and a question. As a user of Prolog, a system not designed to manage upstream contracts or project margins, how do you typically see customers managing customer contracts to the back office? I'll throw that to Tim.
How do we see them managing contracts to the back office?
Yes, sales and revenue, specifically.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think that a lot of that is in flux, and it depends on the individual customer. So some people are using combinations of their ERP solutions with their project control solutions, and it's really one of those things that company by company, there may be variations in the way that they choose to manage different aspects of a project and where they choose to do that. And I think that's something that we're looking at too, is where's the right place when we talk to our customers is, where would you rather do that? Or does it necessarily have to be in a different system? Can we do it in such a way where there's an exchange of information, but people can work in a user interface that they want to work in the future with things like Project Site and the new products that we're putting out on the market?
Right, and the part I'll layer into Tim's answer on that, and he mentioned Project Site at the end, which is our next generation of project control solution, is reimagining the financial part of it, because the reality is Prolog set the precedent in the marketplace for 20 plus years. I competed against Prolog in my old Primavera days. It was the industry standard for budget and cost management. Today still is the industry standard, and that's something that we're building on top of in the Project Site, that next generation product. And those are things that we're in conversations with customers about. How deep do we get into the revenue, forecasting, et cetera, parts of managing a project?
Good. Dan, I'm going to throw this question to you because I think your presentation touched on it. It comes from Gordon Aronson, and I'll shorten up the question, but he's getting to the issue is, why has efficiency continued to decrease as tech use was growing?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Hey, Gordon. Known Gordon my entire professional career. So, yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. And this is not just, by the way, in the construction industry. It's true. There are people that argue with all the technology over the last 20 or 30 years that as a society we're less productive than we used to be. I call shenanigans on that, by the way, personally. I can do more on my phone in one day than I could do in 2 years back in the 90s. But anyways, some of the challenges, because I don't want to come across as saying that technology alone is going to solve this productivity problem. Tim and I were on a little bit of a rant earlier this week about the fact, and there's a question I saw also about contracting, how this industry is contracted. So I'll tell you, one of the things I personally believe that inhibits productivity growth in our industry is the crazy way our contracts are written. In fact, I would argue these contracts are written to absolutely minimize productivity, most of them. And there's a question I know about IPD, which is an attempt to try to adjust that, where companies are contracted to do what's in their best personal self-interest, and by definition will sub-optimize the overall project to benefit themselves. So I think we need to attack this from a contract language perspective. But part of the reason is, if we think about output over cost, one of the things that's irrefutable is costs have gone up substantially, and they continue to go up. Right now, one of the other challenges in our industry is material cost, as we see with some of the trade wars that are going on. So we see material costs are going up. Labor costs have not gone down. Labor is more expensive than ever. So your cost side, your denominator in my output divided by cost, is going up. And what's happening is output isn't keeping pace. So although we're producing more, we're not producing more faster than it's costing us to produce it, which is why productivity is going down. The other thing that's true about our industry is I look at buildings that are done now compared to what they look like in the 90s when I joined the industry. The complexity, it's a complete different ballgame. The system complexity in these buildings, so complexity is going up, which of course makes it more difficult to produce, which takes longer to do, which then, again, your numerator's not going up faster than your denominator. So, again, this is not purely a technology. However, there's no question technology plays a big role. The fact that people are double, triple, quadruple entering You have full-time people. If you think about this, I was talking with a major contractor. You had an entire group build up in a construction company, the VDC, the Virtual Design and Construction Group, grew up. Those are people that didn't exist when I joined this industry, right? That was done by people in the field. You sat there and you took two 2D pieces of drawings and you put them over a light table and you found out where the clashes were. Now you have an entire group within a construction company that does that digitally. So that's an increased cost, right? So anyway, so that's my answer as to why this happened. I think that the cost and the complexity is outstripping our ability to deal with it. And part of it is also...
Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to walk in there. Yeah, so I also think, too, going back to historically, and I'm going to jump back on slides right now, is a lot of, I think, when we developed our contracting methodology, we have a lot of vertical markets that are still contracting as if they were in construction 1.0. So we haven't seen the shift in the way in the things that we're asking a contractor to do. Those things are still envisioned and contracted to do as if they were still done via paper, which doesn't translate well to the reality of where we are right now. So I think some education from in the marketplace as to what's available and how we should be contracting, because the contractor is going to do what he's contracted to do, right? If you contract him to work off the BIM model, he's going to do it. Even if you just give him a set of points in the sky and he has to completely rebuild the thing to a constructible model, the contractors are going to go out and do that to win the work. But we need to educate ourselves on the front end of these things. Just like we said, we want these productivity gains of having a better design, but our contracting methodologies and our specifications haven't advanced at the same rate that the technology is advanced.
Good. $64,000 question coming from Tom Zachariah. Will it be difficult to get the owner, parentheses client, the engineering company, parentheses the design firm, and the subcontractor, installer, to sign up for this and agree to incorporate it?
Yeah, so difficult, the answer I'll give is it's not going to be easy. But then again, interesting problems are almost never easy to solve. So what Trimble's on the path of doing with the acquisition of eBuilder, which is the leading owner solution, already having Project Site, which is one of the leading contractor solutions, Tekla on the MEP side, our field technology group, we have all the pieces in place. So, for example, we're already in the process of working with the country's largest owners, and these owners are routine builders, in order to have them pull some groups together. So we're planning symposiums to have the owners host their top contractors, designers, and specialty subcontractors to come together and have conversations about this. Because, again, it's not technology. I'm of the opinion that technology is an enabler. Technology typically doesn't solve problems. It enables people to solve problems. So is it going to be challenging? Yes. But for the first time in 24 years, I actually see a path to having that happen. Because what we learned and the value we brought into Trimble from the eBuilder team is the owners are finally standing up and expressing an opinion. So I think for years, the owners would just sit back and effectively what the contractors were telling them, I'll just accept. And that's no longer true. We're telling the owners not only do you need to lean into the rest of the supply chain, you also need to say, by the way, you're going to do all this, you're going to save me all this money, and I keep it all myself. So I had a contractor once tell me when I was asking them about their investment in BIM, at the end of the day, they said, if the owner's not going to pay me for it, why would I do it? I'm not going to do it just out of the kindness of my heart. However, we are working with innovative companies, both in the owner, the contractor, and the subcontractor, who do believe that it's not just about their company. It's about helping elevate the entire industry, and those are the people we're partnering up with. So, yes, it's going to be a challenge, but I absolutely have line of sight to having this happen.
Tim, do you want anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% with Dan. Is if I look at my tenure in writing software and building software for the construction industry, we've done some great things, but the major challenges we've been trying to solve are the same two for the last 15 years, which is What's a more efficient way to do RFIs and submittals and collaborate with each other? Or how do we interoperate information? I think that we're getting to a point where technology is advanced to a point that with the advent of BIM, with the advent of some of the emerging technologies with IoT, with these integrated systems, that the owner is starting to see that there's a real world financial benefit to adopting these methodologies. It saves money for everybody. If we can eliminate an issue before it ever happens, and we then don't have concrete in place that's the wrong mix design and we have to jackhammer it out and have a legal fight over it, what could we actually be spending the money on? And I think the interesting challenge is, again, through education, where when somebody looks at, do I use these type of technologies, and I'll pick on a school district, for example, but no intention here. If I have a choice between building 3 more classrooms or spending a little bit more money on the front-end design, I think we tend to lean towards building the 3 more classrooms. But I think maybe if we looked at having the better design and integrated contracting strategies, we'd actually get the money to be able to build the 3 classrooms anyway, if that makes sense.
And to lean on into Tim's point, we actually had an account on the owner side of our business that was able to lower the contingency. So one of the things that's pretty standard in this industry is you have a certain % contingency you set aside in order to deal with things that go unexpectedly. With the investment in technology, so from an owner's perspective, they're setting money aside that they could be spending on other things, and they were able to lower contingency enough to open up a cancer center years before their original plan called for. So that's an example where putting money to work, to Tim's point, an investment in technology where before that investment they couldn't do it because they didn't have the line of sight into the money they need. The last thing you need is a project to go sideways. You don't have cash to pay to fix the issue.
Oh, here's a kind of an interesting question from, and I'm going to try to pronounce the name correctly, Imen Chiki. He really liked the presentation. They really liked the presentation, but this question is really to both of you. Do you think that DFMA, Design for Manufacturing Assembly, should be integrated part of Construction 4.0?
I think, personally, I think yes. I think that our suppliers and subcontractors need to be brought to the table, and this may make some people mad, but these are the guys that know how to put things in place. So if we're really going to move towards a model, feeding a model to the job site, I don't know that it's going to be interesting about the design phase of this and who's involved in it, because I'd much rather have my steel manufacturer telling the job site how that the connections are detailed rather than maybe somebody that doesn't know, for example, right? So I do think and what we're seeing internationally and here with the ability to do prefabrication and, producing things off-site, I think as our labor shortages continue and as the cost of materials goes up over time, these things are going to become critical.
Yeah, and really what I'm seeing is the industry has hit an inflection point because it can't continue. People have been complaining about construction productivity since when I joined the industry back in '95. However, things continue to move forward. But right now, we've hit a point where what I predict is things are going to start breaking. And therefore, there's a lot of, because we can't solve it from the technology side. We can't just go in and tell everybody this is how you should be doing it. The industry, the owner, and I really honestly think it starts with the owners, need to tell the rest of the supply chain that status quo is not going to work. What got us here is not going to get us there. Projects are only getting more complex. I don't see anybody saying they're going to work for less money. I don't see owners asking for less complex projects to be built, and I don't see them saying, by the way, take longer and lower your safety standards and lower your quality. That's not happening. So all of that is going up. I want a more safe job site. I want better quality. I want it for cheaper, and I want it faster. There's only one way I know how to balance all that, and that is change the way things are done contractually, and then a heavy investment in technology. And when I saw one of the comments when Tim showed the mom with all the IoT that she's interacting with, and they never thought about that. And the other thing that's changing is there's a mass influx of new, younger people into the industry, and they expect this. One of the questions I saw was about 2D. We still see 2D everywhere. I can tell you right now, all my children who are young adults to late teens, they do everything in 3D. Minecraft, everything they do, they're thinking everything in 3D, so then when they have to go down and look at a 2D piece of paper, they don't understand it. They just scratch their head. So what we think is stuff that's never going to change, and I've been told my whole career this is never going to happen. I delivered the first punch list app on a Palm Pilot, if anybody out there even knows what that is or remember what that is. And I was told that nobody's ever going to spend money on a handheld device in construction. I was told to my face it will never happen. Now I walk around and say, how many iPhones and Android phones do I see? So that was clearly wrong. I was told there'd never be manufacturing robotic automation on a job site. I just watched a YouTube video of a robot cutting and installing drywall, completely automated. Masonry walls being installed, completely automated. So anybody who tells me it's never going to happen, I'll tell you right now, not interested in listening.
Dan, by the way, I owned and used a Palm Pilot.
So you've revealed your age.
I have. Hey, here's a good question, I think, right in your wheelhouse, too, for both of you. It's from Tabitha Shirazi. How do you get buy-in from the owner to spend the money on a never-used-before technology?
Yeah, by the way, if anybody can answer that question, give me a call and let me know. But in all honesty, the way you do that, never been used, is you have to find an innovative owner. Because what a lot of people are waiting for, Tim and I were on one of our Nahito calls and talking with a contractor, and we were talking about some of the innovation we're working on. And the comment was, really, for us, we're not an early adopter. That's what this individual said. Our company doesn't adopt technology early, and therefore you need to find somebody else who will do it, build the case study, demonstrate the value, and then the market will adopt it. And that's pretty standard market adoption dynamics. So it's a matter of and that's what we're doing on the eBuilder Enterprise side with our owners, is you find the owner who is willing to say, hey, I'm going to take a chance on this, hope that it works. And then if it does, then it will go ahead and start to get adopted throughout the rest of the industry. Another tactic that I did back in my New Forma days, or I observed, was there was a group of CIOs up in the upper Midwest, and what they would do, there was 8 of them, and whenever new technology came up, they basically round robin through the 8 of them. So they all agreed, or most of them agreed, this was interesting. So whose turn is it to try the new thing? And they would try it. And that way they distributed the risk amongst the 8 of them. But they also shared the reward that if it didn't work, okay, you took that bullet, someone else will take the next one. But if it worked, they immediately shared it quickly amongst them. So they're different strategies, but certainly just saying this is unproven, brand new technology, but we think it's going to save the world. Everybody go buy it. That's not the way technology happens.
Well, and it's from my standpoint, does it fit in with the bigger vision of what's happening in the marketplace right now? So there are some standards, because there's a whole lot of people creating technology that winds up being on a technology island. And what good is that? And so if you have a piece of software or a piece of hardware that does something really cool, but it can't talk to anything else or integrate workflows with anything else, it's really kind of like just a little point solution. So as educating owners on how to evaluate technology to see, is it going to be something that integrates in with what they want to do and fits a longer-term profile of a technology they want to bring into their house, I think, they can kind of look at it, and if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, maybe it's a duck. But I think education is going to be the key, is educating owners in a way that they can understand what's available and what should technology really look like, so that there's not so much risk in rolling out a new technology. And we're seeing some evolution of that on the government side, looking at data security and things behind the scenes that are going on, and writing those types of requirements into their specifications. I mean, tying back to contracting, does technology need to be written, some standards need to be written into our contracting? It's interesting.
It is, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. Please join me in thanking Dan Connery and Tim Davis for their presentations, as well as our sponsor, eBuilder. If you have any additional questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the Email Us button on the console, and we'll make sure our presenters get them and follow up with you. Please visit enr.com/webinars for an archive of this presentation, as well as information about our upcoming events. Make sure to tune in for our next webinar, 2019 Construction Forecast, Boom, Bust, or Draw, airing on January 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope you found this webinar to be a good investment of your time today. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.